hard to believe that right now I'm already thinking about fall and actively preparing to plant stuff for fall, or at least get it started. It's not even spring yet, it's crazy. We're gonna do a little bit of that, and I also want to, I'm out here in the middle of the day because I'm gonna look and see at my squash and the tall tale signs that there's some kind of issue, because we are actively in the squash vine borer season. So I want to just kind of be on top of it. And the middle of the day is the best time to look in the garden for this. You wanna say hi, Chunky Monkey? No? Yeah. She eats everything, and I mean things she's not supposed to. Gosh, you're getting heavy. Go get them. Pretty windy today. I don't know if you can tell from the sound. I really hope you can't. The wind's hitting my back, so it shouldn't be too bad. But when we look at these squash, you know, the squash vine borer, it gives you the tall tale sign of limping leaves, but also squash like to look kind of puny in the heat anyways sometimes. So there's a big difference, and today with the wind, it's gonna be a little bit difficult, but we'll see what it looks like. Can you tell which way the wind's blowing? Jeez. So we don't have any like super limpy leaves yet, but look at this guy. We do have this. And see what he does? That's organic pest treatment right there. But I don't see anything super limpy yet, so that's good. And I know this is a continuation from the last episode that I put out, but you can see right now we're getting a really good view at the stalks, at least on one side. So you can kind of, you know, it's all displayed out in the open. Got some bad pollination here. So we can get a good look and see if there's any kind of squash vine borer eggs yet, which thankfully I don't see. So that's really it. It's a pretty simple test. I mean, you look at it and you see it, and if it's super limpy, then it's not. But a lot of times during the day, you'll see this one's not blowing around like crazy. You may see something kind of like this, and it's not something to be super alarmed about. So you see on this leaf here how it's kind of limpy. That's just a natural response to the heat, and it's actually trying to retain moisture as we get through. Look, see it right there? Just can't. But that's a natural response, and if you see that, you come out in the morning and it'll just perk right back up like the rest of them. It is kind of warm, but I think the wind's keeping it just cool enough where it's not really sapping the energy out of them. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. We're good. So far, so good. Technically, I'm gonna call this day one of squash vine borer season. Day one. All right, so now it's time for fall. I'm gonna go check on these onions and potatoes and see what we're gonna do after they come in, because this has been really stressful for me to think about. Woo! It's gonna be onion time soon. Taters are getting there, so that's good. Okay, so we got these two beds, and then we've got this bed over here. So we've got this tater bed here, which is coming right along. It looks like it's starting to show its age. And this is my son's bed. So the kind of poses a problem with all of this. The problem really is, it's his bed. I'm not gonna force him to plant anything in the bed that he doesn't want to. And the way that taters and onions are harvested, they're in like a weird time of the year. But we're gonna have to see what we can do, and I'm gonna have to talk to him and see if he's willing to plant what I want there, or if not, like I said, he can do it. But then you check this out. Look at these onions. Look at that. Look at that, would you? We are getting so close. Not all of them are beautiful, but that's a mighty fine onion right there. Once you get this out of the way, that right there, that's gonna be an onion rings. We're looking at harvesting these anytime now, probably. I was looking back and it looks like we're about 30 days out on the potatoes, and then on the onions, I don't know how far out we are. Judging the stalks, we're probably honestly about the same, about 30 more days roughly. And so that leaves us right about the middle of June. And so the question becomes, what are we going to plant in that space? Because it's like, it's a little late for, you know, watermelons and cantaloupes and stuff like that. And, you know, there's not but so many green beans I need. There no more peppers can go in. The squashes, it's like right in that sweet moment for the squash vine borer, because like I said, the squash vine borer lasts for about a month roughly. So you could fill it up real quick with squash, but then you may just be feeding, you know, what I call the little bastard. So it's kind of, you know, this weird in-between spot as far as growing goes. And so that's when I thought about like, hey, why don't I start something for fall now? Something that needs to be planted early and grow even longer. And so yesterday I came out here and I planted, or I started something. I started a little something to put out into the garden. And here we have Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts it's an ongoing saga for me. If you guys have been watching for any amount of time, you know this is gonna be my 4th year attempting to grow these Brussels sprouts. And this is an heirloom variety, and I only did 1 6-pack because I actually want to switch to a hybrid variety, and I'll talk about that in a second. But just a little synopsis about what's been going on with our Brussels sprouts. During this whole conversation right here, don't think about it as Brussels sprouts, insert your own vegetable. So we looked at it, and we eat a lot of Brussels sprouts over the winter in our house. I mean, like an abnormal amount of Brussels sprouts. We apparently love them. So we tried to grow them. I knew they grew in the fall, planted them in the fall. Never really amounted to anything. Planted them a little bit earlier the next year. No, the same time the next year, and just thought maybe I had an off year or whatever. Didn't really amount to much. Just got like super small. The next year went a little bit earlier, which was last year. And we actually did get a pretty decent, based on the time that I planted it, amount of Brussels sprouts. It still wasn't anything to write home about. I think we got maybe 2 meals off of like 6 plants, which shouldn't be the case. And so in my area, it can be really tough to grow Brussels sprouts. Now, if you listen to the podcast or you've watched this for any amount of time, you know that I like to refer to my area as a heartbreak zone. And that's what makes it hard for the Brussels sprouts, because our falls can be very warm. Sometimes we'll go from 90 degrees and then all of a sudden the highs will be like 60. You know, we can sometimes skip a season, it seems like, and it's always the pleasant season we skip. But at the same time, we eat so many that I'm like determined to figure it out. And so already this year we've been doing this thing in our garden, which I kind of want to do, but I don't know how far I want to go with it, where we're monocropping each bed. And so if you just take this section right here, we've got an onion bed with a row of garlic, yes, but mostly an onion bed, a potato bed, a sweet potato bed, and then basically a squash bed in the back. And the trellises don't count because we don't grow the squash on the trellises, but you get what I'm saying here. And so I really do like this scenario where this is planted this way. It actually works really well because I know, like, hey, all of my potatoes are here. When they all come up, something else can go in, and the same for everything else back here. And I've been doing it with the sweet potatoes for years and years and years. Well, maybe not years and years and years. It's not like I'm like super old, but don't let the gray fool you. But I've been doing it for a number of years with the sweet potatoes, and it's worked out well because they take up so much space. So that's why we're thinking, hey, why don't we do a Brussels sprout bed? So we know that we've got the potatoes here, the onions here. I started some tomato seedlings last week, and I know that they're gonna go in one of these beds, and then we have Brussels sprouts. And so let's just go ahead and say that my son does not want to grow Brussels sprouts, which I don't blame him. I'm gonna say that we're not gonna do it because for him, the juice may not be worth the squeeze. You know, I want to get him something that's going to get him interested, and watching something grow for 6 months just may not be interesting enough. I want to get him out there and get him active harvesting. So we're going to say that he's not going to have them. But I think what I'm going to do is I don't want to put tomatoes in this bed here because it is tomatoes in the potato bed, because the potatoes, gosh, I can't wait to stop saying those back to back. They're basically a nightshade, so you could kind of pass diseases along. You could have pests really take hold in the soil and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure this is gonna be our Brussels sprout bed for the fall. And we're gonna try and get them in. If we do start the seeds now, hopefully by the beginning of July, they should be ready to go. And then we can get them into the garden and really get them, I mean, we're talking almost a 2.5 month super strong growth period for them compared to what we usually do. And then our tomatoes will go over here. And so it's gonna work out good too, I think, because once the tomatoes, the second round of tomatoes starts to grow up, they will cast a little bit of shade in the heat and cause them to kind of get relief from the sun. Not to mention this gets more early morning sun than this bed. So in the afternoon when it gets beat down real hard, those tomatoes will cast a little bit of a shadow and help keep those plants cooler so we can, you know, keep them stronger. And maybe, I don't know, they're biennial, but at some point they could be triggered into a bolting response based on our fall, because our temperatures can just yo-yo so much. So hopefully it'll help keep that down. Now I may be overthinking it. This whole stress thing that I've been dealing with about these two beds, that, you know, that can be alleviated by having a good solid garden plan, which is what I tried to do. But from the beginning with this monocropping, as we switch over and it being the first year, it's kind of, it'll work itself out in the long run. So I do want to show you though, the tomatoes that we started last week. I want to check on the root systems on there, if there is even some, and see what's going on there. So it's been a week. They're still sitting in water, and you can see how soggy it is. But let's pull it up and see what's going on here. And I've seen some growth, so I know something's going on. Haha, look at that. That's 1 week's worth of growth. I'm not gonna argue with that at all. So we'll put that back there. You can see all of these tomatoes from here over were all the ones that we started last week. And actually I did come out and take some cuttings off of a husk tomato. So we put that out there too. But I noticed that they were all seeming strong and not really limping anymore. So I knew something was going on. So we'll just continue to grow these out, and I'll repot them in like a 4-inch pot soon, but they're doing well. And these are gonna be our fall crop of tomatoes. This is where the addiction comes in. I feel like we will be able to start more tomatoes. And I think what I want to do is I want to start an indeterminate tomato, but not any indeterminate tomato. I want to do another one of this dwarf geranium kiss over here. So this is that dwarf geranium kiss right here, and you can see it's, I mean, you've got some other tomatoes back here and they're doing good, but these are real strong. Man, they just, it's sturdy, it's short, it's bushy, just like it's supposed to be. So I think we're going to kind of move into that direction a little bit, and I'm gonna try and take some suckers off of that this week at some point and start some more. So, I mean, with 1 week, I think that we can really probably get another crop. And the reason why I want to do that one instead of the other indeterminate tomatoes that I'm growing is because they stay so short. There's really something about that. When the plant doesn't get really big, it can kind of get to its determined height. And even though it's indeterminate, it is kind of a determined height for that variety. So we can kind of get it to that height, and then it can focus on fruit production. Because I know I've got one over here. Actually, I'm not even going to point. I'll show you how many flowers are on it. And if this is an indication of how it's going to produce, this is definitely a genetic that I want to keep for years to come. And this is why I do the heirlooms for some of these tomatoes, so I can save the seeds and really keep the best ones. Look at that cluster right there. That's going to be a lot of tomatoes on that one cluster. So we're going to I think I'll try and find a sucker on this plant itself and take it. But even the other one looks good because this one was planted a couple weeks before the other one. But as far as the Brussels sprout goes, the reason why I don't really care about doing an heirloom for that is because I'm not going to save the seed from it. I mean, look, if the zombie apocalypse comes, the pandemic 2.0 times 500 to the third power comes, and I need some, you know, some seeds for some Brussels sprouts or something, I have to figure it out. But for right now, like growing that, getting it strong, and doing a hybrid variety, one, I can get a plant more suitable to my area. I can get one that's more disease resistant and to produce at a certain time. And some of them, I'm not totally sure because I haven't really looked into it quite yet, but I need to. They may end up growing in a specific time, like be able to be harvested. So I may be able to get like an early maturing, a mid maturing, and a late maturing, so I can stagger my harvest but really still plant at the same time, which would be ideal for me. So that's kind of my thoughts on the hybrid or heirloom. As far as that goes, I've typically been like heirloom all the way, nothing but solid history, and I don't think that's going to really work out good, especially for some of the fall and spring vegetables. I don't really save a lot of seeds for those, and some of them I've found over the years just aren't worth saving the seeds. So I think for the Brussels sprouts, especially for right now, I'm going to get me a crutch, because sometimes they can be a crutch, and that's okay, and help me to grow more and be more productive.
Goodbye.